Greetings. My name is NaConda N. Frank. I'm known as the Homeschool Whisperer. I am a home education consultant and a homeschooler of 5 children in the state of Texas. I would like to answer your question. As a Black homeschooling family, what do you need to be more successful? And I will start with the first point, which is representation. I believe that there is not enough representation of Black home educators in the field of home education. We see representation from our white counterparts and even a mix of other races and nationalities. But with the growing number of African American homeschool families, it's just not enough. There's always that small amount of representation that we see in photos, in curriculum, and even to teachers, as far as teachers online who teach our students, who teach our children. There's not a lot of brown faces, and I believe that that matters. At one particular time, the area that we live in, we are the minority. We are definitely the minority in the area that we live in. And so many of the homeschool families that live in our area don't look like us. And at one particular time, my oldest 3 children, who are my daughters, they went through the phase where they were identifying themselves and figuring out what that looks like. And as Black Americans surrounded by white Americans, you don't know anything different aside from family. And so if these are the people that you're hanging around with, there's no representation of color outside of family who lives 2 hours away and mom and dad. You start to think that you are like your white counterparts. And that was something that allowed me to want to key in more into finding representation for my children, people that look like us, and being around people that look like us and talk like us and act like us. And so that began my journey. I think that it's very important because culturally, our kids need to know that they are not a part of the same culture. We have different hair, we have different faces, we have different beliefs, we have a different history. Everything about us is different, and that representation is very important. I would love to see more online teachers for home educators that look like us. I think I remember being in public school as a child, and I would just feel like I was at home when I had Black teachers. And I felt like they pushed me more. I felt like they had more passion into what they taught because they were teaching other Black children. They were teaching Black children. And it was like they kind of knew the struggles that we were going to go through. And so they took the time and that extra effort and they put that into their teaching. And they gave us little life lessons along the way, along with the curriculum that they were teaching us. But that was because they we were represented together. We were all in the same community. We all looked alike. We talked alike. We liked the same things. And so they knew that, and they were able to take that and add that little bit of representation into our education so that we could communicate together. We were on the same page, and we could just bond knowing that our teacher was Black, our teacher was helping us and protecting us and teaching us about, the quarrels of the world and things like that. And so I think that the same thing needs to happen in the homeschool community. I am also an online educator, and I've gotten a lot of students because I am a person of color. And I believe that it's very important because a lot of subjects that we want our children to learn, we kind of want them to learn from people that look like them. Even in the media presence, when we typically hear and see about home education, we see white people. And there are more homeschoolers that are people of color and people of various races. But when we see that in the media, typically you see a Caucasian person. And I believe that allowing people of color to be more mainstream in topics like home education and being in pictures and books about home education, it lets everyone else know that, hey, this is just not something that white people do. This is something that the Black community does as well. And it's important and it's needed and it's necessary. Along with representation, curriculum counts. I do know of a few homeschool curriculums that are African American created and based on African Americans, but I don't believe that there are enough curriculum options. There are options that are geared towards the African heritage, and then there are curriculum that are more mainstream based, but there's just a few. I would love to just have as many options for curriculum choice options as there are for our white counterparts. I mean, you look up any curriculum and you will see on their webpage, that it's written by these professors or parents or whomever, and most of them don't look like us. So I could probably count on both of my hands how many African American centered and African American written curricula there are. And I think that that's not good enough. The more options we have means that we are represented more in our community and we are doing more for our community. The second reason that I believe that I would like to see something else, I would like to see more of, that I believe would make me as a homeschool mom and as a homeschool family more successful, is promoting how effective the homeschool journey can be for our children. Many people seek or think that home education is done out of fear. And for some people, that may be true. As a home education consultant, I always tell my clients that if you are educating your children at home because you're afraid of them being in traditional schools or public schools, that's not a good enough reason. One of the reasons that a homeschool journey can be effective for people of color is that we can teach our children the truths that they don't learn in a traditional setting, a traditional school setting. A lot of history is whitewashed. A lot of history is not in textbooks that are in the classroom. And I mean, it's just not enough. There is so much history that our ancestors have given us that is more than slavery, and it's typical that we learn about slavery, but what happened before slavery and what happened after slavery, aside from the civil rights and things where we were demeaned and we were, thrown under the bus, and where we are seen as the victim. I want to teach my children the truths where our ancestors were kings and queens and princesses, and we owned things and we created things and we invented things. That's what, as a home educator, I am able to introduce those truths. I remember at the beginning of our journey, the first few months when we celebrated certain holidays, we got the certain holidays on the calendar, and we talked about the truths about those holidays, what they were taught in school, and what the real holidays meant, who those people really were, and why we were going to choose not to celebrate those holidays. And I just remember the shock on my oldest children's faces, because for so many years, they had been taught that certain holidays were okay and that they were happy and festive and fun, when it was really more dire circumstances behind it. And another thing, adding on to that, is that we moved into the area that we live in now. And for the 2 years that they were in public school, no Black history was taught in the month of February. No Black history was taught at all. And although we had discussions at home, I felt like we were at a total disadvantage because they were a part of the handful of Black students in that school. And I just felt really angry that in our Black History Month, in our month of celebration, nothing was taught in the schools. And for that reason, I love promoting homeschool for African Americans because our kids need to know the truth that they don't learn in traditional schooling. We can also provide spiritual anchoring and set our kids up with a strong faith basis and prepare them to enter the world as world citizens. If you are a believer in whatever religion you choose to follow, you are able to hone into your beliefs and allow your children to study what you believe in and practice it more because you're at home with them. You're able to mold them and teach them and allow them to read and do research and pray and whatever else it is. And I believe that um, establishing that gives them a mental stability and a spiritual stability that helps them become more effective adults and anchoring that faith that they have in whatever religion you choose to believe in, anchoring them during those years that you are homeschooling. And it allows their faith to grow so that when they are out on their own and living in the world, they are able to go back to that anchor that you set when they were homeschooling. And you were able to just know that your children are going to be okay because you were able to give them, help them create that anchor to help them remain steadfast in their faith and their beliefs so that when they are out in the world and living on their own, they can go back and look back and remember things that they were taught and remember lessons that they learned and things that they read and researched and know that they are going to be okay and know how to handle situations. I also believe that home education can help heal trauma that many Black children experience in traditional schools and even in the world. With recent events, I can't imagine what the school year is going to look like for children who are going to be returning to public school next year as a child of color. What is that going to look like? People have become sensitive and some people have grown in their anger. So I can't imagine the trauma that some of these students are going to be going through as they enter back into the traditional school realm. With home education, we're able to allow our children time to heal. During the recent events with the protests and all of the killings of these people of color, um, my husband and I were able to just talk to our children about it and allow them space to think about that and have space and time to talk about it amongst each other and talk about feelings and walking around in our city and in our local mall and saying, hey, what do you think about this? If you were in a store and going through scenarios and things like that, and we're able to love on them and nurture them as opposed to if they were in a public school setting, everything would be quick because, they go on field trips, they're around different people that we may not know they're around, and you just don't have time to tell them everything that you need to tell them. Or maybe you do have time to tell them, but you have to give all these traumatic details to an elementary child who's not ready to accept that. But because they are in a traditional school setting where they're going to experience bullying and hatred from people, you got to tell them that, and their innocence is just gone. But as homeschool families, we are able to nurture our children and teach them about these circumstances let's face it, that we experience and they're going to experience, but we can do it in a more proactive way, which allows them more time to process the information versus it being thrown at them or them having to live through that trauma and then have to learn about it afterwards, taking the test first and then learning what was on the test afterwards. Sometimes they go through that backwards. And the homeschool experience allows our children to go through it in a process and step by step. We can spend more time giving them the tools that they need to maintain their mental stability and be able to withstand whatever trauma and negativity for people who are not on their side. So, as a Black homeschooling family, I think we need more representation and to be successful. And I also believe that we need to promote how effective the homeschool journey can be for our children. There are lots of things that can go along with that, but those are two that I believe that we need more of in order to be successful African American homeschool families. Thank you.